online Liz Guthridge, who is a change leadership and change communication consultant. What is your approach to change management?
My approach to change management is getting there in the middle, working both ends. So on the one side, definitely thinking it from the top, what's driving the change, what is the change, who's behind it, and what we need to do. But as soon as that is defined, working very closely with those who are affected by the change. It's really important to really fine-tune who are these stakeholders. And I think it's very important that we call them stakeholders, not audience members, as some are prone to do, especially where I come from, the field of communications, because they are not audience members. They are stakeholders. We want them to take action.
I'm going to just probe into this just a little bit. What have you found has been really useful for building that relationship with stakeholders in your change management work and getting them engaged?
Well, certainly from a standpoint, it's important to define who they are, where they are in terms of just physically, demographically, psychographically, what their stake is. Are they going to be winners? Are they going to be losers? Do we not know? Really, in the past, I would say couple of years, is this idea that a lot of people who can have a lot of influence are not often the people who are in influential jobs, but just influential people. And it's this idea that the new somebodies are the old nobodies. It's really important for leaders to have their ears to the ground or their eyes, social media feeds, and be paying attention to who these folks are, because they can really make a difference in bringing along everybody else with the change.
What have you noticed as the evolution?
Certainly the speed at which we're all working and the speed at which we need to change is certainly very different. The information overload that we're all suffering from. I mean, it used to be information was very, very precious, and now it's not only a commodity, but it's just overwhelming us. And also I think the other thing that's been a real influence in work is how much more we know about the brain. And it used to be kind of rule of thumb. We had a number of us in the change management profession had a thing that you had to repeat things like at least 5 times because people would not know what was going on, or they would be concerned about something. It would take a number of times for them to get the message. And certainly I think that's still the case because of the reinforcement needing to happen. But we also just don't pay attention to stuff. And this idea that we need to, I think for some people are interpreting repeat it 5 times is to repeat it the exact same way 5 times. And I think people are going to ignore stuff and get even more frustrated. And that's where I think it's very important is to reach people where they are. So use channels that work really effectively for them, which is where some social media can be very effective for some, not some for others. Posting like 5 emails on the same subject are not going to cut it. In the change world, we are not CNN, we are not Fox News, where it's just a constant cycle. We're not broadcasting a radio station. We really need to get in there and give people the information that they need on their terms, their timing, to help them understand, cut through the clutter, understand, and then have a really clear call to action and what that means to them and how to help them take that action.
You hear your audience and your clients saying about change management work these days, including the impact of social media.
And I have a model that I like to use, and a client really gravitated toward it because it's thinking about it in 3 ways. What's the what? What's the so what? So why should people care? And now, what's the now what? When I took a client through that model just recently, they realized that the so what and the now what really only affected a small percentage of people who were not following a lot of procedures that they were fine-tuning. And so we really focused a lot of the communication on those folks and their leaders to really explain to them why this was so critical. And then they have Chatter, which is the Salesforce.com internal version of Twitter or Yammer or Facebook. And so we were able to talk about what we were doing. So we were there being very transparent about everything and using their voices. So it was the leaders' voices being very authentic in that regard, but saying that here's who it really affects. Here's why we're doing this. We need to make sure that we're staying. It all had to do with trust, because it was an organization that values its trust with its customers as well as its employees, and we need to make sure we need to be more trustworthy.
What do you see on the horizon for change management as a field in general for what's happening now?
What I see on the horizon is little is the new big.
Mm-hmm.
From the standpoint that I think we're going to be able to, and we have to make changes on a more micro level to always be responding. Coming back to this idea of acknowledging the brain and how we all respond and focusing on that, so less of the episodic grief model of change and more the individual brain change. It's so important, I believe, for change leaders to have a very, very clear call to action, and as part of that, it's also call to non-action. What can you stop doing?
Mm-hmm. Media, so she has a wonderful footprint online, and so I encourage you to Google and find out more about her. But for good to know that you have a presence on Twitter. For those of you who like Twitter, your preferences are for the Twitter and the LinkedIn as well as your flagship website. Have a great change management day then.
Thank you.